Hello everyone and welcome to the iSpring Solutions webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today as we're going to speak about virtual reality and how to create virtual reality without breaking the bank. My name is Paulina, I am a community manager and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. As our guest speaker, we have today with us Michael Sheyahshe. Hi Michael, how are you doing? Thanks for joining.
Hi, Paulina. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
Michael is a developer and technologist at Alternative Media, and he will be more than happy to talk for you guys today. So at the end of the webinar, as usual, we are going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and I'm sure that a lot of you guys are really interested in virtual reality and have questions about it, don't hesitate to submit them in the question box, which should be on the right side of the GoToWebinar panel. And at this point, we are ready to begin. So Michael, I'm passing the mic over to you.
All right. Thank you very much.
And I'm going to change the presenter right now.
Okay. All right. Okay. And you should be seeing my screen. Is that correct? Should be seeing the title slide.
I can see the screen. Can you guys see the screen, Michael's presentation? Yes, looks like
Okay, good.
it's working. All right?
Great. Always like when it works. So,
right.
hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for iSpring for hosting this webinar. So it's VR made easy. Create virtual reality without breaking the bank. Okay, so make sure we get our webcam off. So today, again, I'll be talking about VR. I'm a technologist with Alternative Media, which is a technology and innovation studio here in the United States. So a couple of things I'll be talking about, why virtual reality, why VR? What's the benefit for e-learning? Is VR just a fad or focus? Why focus on budget and why me? So VR, of course, has gained a lot of momentum with Oculus Rift. There's a lot of information in the public eye currently. The bennies or benefits, as I call them, so that you have more learner engagement, more innovation. As you're an e-learning developer, designer, you are creating constructs and environments by which you need to engage learners. And of course, doing virtual reality or VR demonstrates that you are part of the cutting edge, that you're keeping up with the innovations in technology. And the main focus is always to grab the learner attention and to give your message, whatever it is, via your content. So why I'm currently presenting on VR and virtual reality, I have over 20 years in e-learning and IT. And also I have an MFA in 3D modeling and do simulations and games quite a bit. So as I go through in my e-learning career, I try to bring in as much 3D as I can, and VR is a good way to do it. So with that, let's move forward. So this session is really going to be about what VR is and isn't. I'm going to show you some types and examples of VR. And then I'll show you some ways to create them and develop them with very little capital or budget. Now, as we move forward, I'll have that caveat that, the joke is nothing is free. And so in these options, whether it's open source or free or very little money, the reason it wouldn't be completely free is because it takes your time or resources or someone to develop it. So we'll be looking at things like Google Cardboard, SDK, and how to create these things on the cheap, so to speak. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, even if you're a basic user, never have used it, or are quite familiar with virtual reality, let's just take a couple of quick moments and look at it. Just using the straight Wikipedia definition, we want to see the virtual reality as just anything where we use technology to create realistic images or some sort of environment that we can simulate or recreate a presence inside that environment. So I use this because it's a good way to talk about the difference between AR and VR. So AR would be augmented reality, and VR would be the virtual reality. So the main difference is augmented reality adds to existing environment, and virtual reality recreates and hopefully immerses your user in a new environment or a totally recreated environment inside of it. So You can think of augmented reality as layers and VR as no layers but a totally immersive reality. And VR versus AR may be a talk for another day, but I just want to make sure that we understand the basic difference. So, like I said, when I talk about how much is a shoestring budget, or how much we want to make sure without breaking the bank, I always like free, and I always like open source when available. But in some of these cases, the items may be near free or very inexpensive, or they may be items within your reach, and that may include things like if you're a Microsoft or OS user for laptops or desktop, things like PowerPoint or Windows Movie Maker, or maybe even if you're an Apple user, things like iMovie. But we'll get into specifics in a little bit. So for now, though, do we have any questions, Paulina? I want to take a time out and make sure we're all on the same page from VR Basics.
It looks like we're good. The only question that was so far was about if you're going to address augmented reality as well.
Okay, and we can have specific questions on augmented reality later. And so all of you on the webinar, please feel free to pop in questions as we go along. Paulina, please interrupt me whenever needed. I'd love to answer any questions as we go along.
Okay.
For now, though, since we talked about VR and AR, let's go ahead and talk about the two major categories of virtual reality. So there's a lot of studies on how VR works and how you present it. In my case, I like to think of it in two broad categories, interactive and passive. I call interactive ones anytime that there are things that can be triggered or things that can be selected or pressed inside the virtual reality rather than just the pan and scan sort of up, left, right, down sort of stuff. So this would include like games and simulations created with Unity, enhanced 2D, which would be like Google's VR camera. And so we would add pictures and other things. So in the passive, and this is what I want to focus on for us, because the passive is easier to create and develop, and passive usually are ones that we can have open source and free resources. So again, some of the differences would be internal triggers, being able to click on something within the VR environment. You can also do these with the Google Cardboard SDK, which we'll talk about in a moment. But for 2D, you would maybe use HTML5 or cloud-based solutions, and to create VR in 3D, Unity or Unreal Engine. For passive ones, and again, that sounds like a derogatory term, but really we just mean ones that the user or learner is not actively doing something inside the VR environment. They're just experiencing it. So these might be created via app, and they might have limited internal triggers. So again, we'll be focusing on the passive ones. So here are a few ways we can look at easy to develop and obtain VR. Some are 360 videos. These are available, say, in Facebook or in YouTube. Of course, to really get the 360 experience, you'll need to use a cardboard or other VR viewer. And for the cardboard, of course, you need iOS or Android devices. Again, some of these are available on YouTube or Facebook. Let me show one if I can here. And this is one that was available on Facebook. This is and should be opening web page here. This is the one from NASA that shows their 360 on Mars. It may take a moment to load. I'll make it full screen. Okay, so notice the play bar is playing. There are things going on. I'm going to drag the mouse left to right. Notice that we can pan up and down. This is an example of a 360 video, although there's not just a whole lot of motion and interaction going on. It is indeed a video. So we could go all the way around and see this life on Mars. And again, this was a few weeks back. It was something on Facebook, and that you could view it on Facebook. And for those of you that use that social environment, you know that you've probably seen 360 videos that you can do and play either on your device or on your desktop. So that being said, I just wanted you to see a quick example of what that is. Let's go back to our notes here. And so that's 360 video. That's a type of VR. You can also use simple 3D models wherein you could play with them in real time. And I have an example of that using Sketchfab. Let me pull that up for you. Sketchfab is a third-party website that allows you to see and view 3D models. And so here we see a 3D model that I put in, and I'm grabbing it, and you can rotate it around. This is a 3D model that I created for a different demonstration, one where I used iSpring to show how you can do HTML5 and gamify mobile learning. But basically this is a sort of playful version of Ash from the Evil Dead series, and so that's why he's got the chainsaw and shotgun. But anyway, you can experience this in real time, and later on I'll show you how we can embed this in iSpring. But again, this is just an example of VR. Again, notice that in this player you can view it in VR. If you click this and had your device ready, meaning your Google Cardboard device, you could view it in the split screen and be immersed and allowed to be rotated around this 3D model. So let's go back to our notes. Okay, and we'll talk about how to put that in iSpring in a bit. Of course, there's 3D and simulations and games. We would make these with Unreal Engine or 3D, Unity 3D. These are usually very interactive, not the passive ones that I've showed you, meaning that there are other things that you can trigger into them. I include some information about how much Unity might cost on the screen. For those of you interested, you could simply just Google, and of course many of you probably are have experienced it, but you know, there's a free version of Unity, but there's also the pro version that allows a lot more things to be done inside of it. So let's take a quick look about how we can add some of this to iSpring. So I'm going to open up a blank slide deck, and we're going to use iSpring to add the Sketchfab, the 360 3D that I showed you. And Paulina, can you see my blank PowerPoint? I just want to make sure.
Yes, I can definitely see
Okay.
it.
Okay, good. We're going to add a web object. And the interesting thing about Sketchfab is that it allows you to embed the information. So what we'll do, let me cancel out of this and go back and get the information first. So let's go back to our Sketchfab. We can embed it here. It creates a link for you. And we'll just grab it as is. Make sure I got that. Copy. Okay. And so this will put this whole viewer on, allow us to embed it in our PowerPoint or in our iSpring suite here. So we'll use the web object, and we will go embed code, and we'll paste everything right here and say OK. We'll display it in slide rather than another browser. It may take a moment because I'm also presenting, so there's a lot of resources being used on my computer here.
Hey Michael, just a quick question. Is it okay if I share your presentation after the webinar with the attendees?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
So let's preview this slide only now that we've loaded. Okay, and again, we're using the preview available from iSpring, and it will create a preview inside the HTML5 web wrapper for us, which you can also customize. However, right now I'm just using the default one. So. And again, I didn't adjust any of the sizes or anything. It may take just a moment. And notice we have scroll bars. Again, I could have adjusted that on the Sketchfab website, but I just loaded it as is. It's a little small for the screen, but that's something you can adjust in the code, in the embed code. But just for quick and dirty use, I wanted to show you that you can indeed not only view it, but manipulate it and see it in real time within iSpring. So let's go back to our notes. Okay, and let's move on. We'll also talk about, first of all, is there any questions, Paulina, about the different types of VR that are sort of passive versions of it?
So far, so good.
Okay. Of course, you can't talk about the different types of VR without talking about what hardware we're going to need, and I know a lot of people are asking that. So while you may be familiar with Oculus Rift, with PlayStation, Sony PlayStation VR, with Vive, there are also some lesser expensive versions. Obviously, the Cardboard, and I was in a local a chain store at Target yesterday, and there's smartphone viewers everywhere, anywhere from $20 American all the way up to 100 or so. So it's becoming more prevalent, more popular. People are creating their own cardboard, Google Cardboard VR viewers that can be used with a smartphone. The main, of course, difference besides price in this hardware is being an integrated device or non-integrated, and by that I mean you'll need a smartphone. For the ones I usually look at and develop for, they're smartphone-based, meaning that I assume someone has a cardboard viewer or similar viewer and that they have some sort of smartphone that can be used. Now, again, the difference will be similar to that interactive or passive. The ones that are created for integrated systems will be very, both are immersive, but one will be very extensive and have head tracking. They may have additional controls. You can see the picture on the screen of the woman with the hand control, and that's especially true for like the PlayStation VR and others. So there are controls available, especially for Google's new version of Cardboard, which is called Daydream. Of course, you can have controls for the older Cardboard, but the new one, the Daydream on the upper right, the gray box, all of these can have controls, and you can program these things like in Unity and other interactive ones. But for our perspective, we'll probably focus on the passive ones, ones where you don't need controls, that just immerses you in the environment. So if anyone needs be, and again, this will be shared after, in order to build your own devices, it's available open source. You literally can build it from cardboard or any devices. There's a lot of YouTubes available on how to do it from paper cups. So any innovation that you add here just adds to the overall experience. So we expect that you, your audience, and your users have a VR viewer, but if they don't, you can always send these instructions on how to create your own. Very simple to do. Now, the hardest part, of course, would be the lenses that are needed. And the lenses are very important for the cardboard viewer or the VR viewer because they facilitate that that immersive or that parallax, not parallax, but the view that simulates real-world eye view. You can build these. There's a lot of do-it-yourself on how to do so. One shown on screen, a lot of them take a plastic bottle and use the curvature of it and fill it with water, like you cut out a little circle and paste them together and fill it with water. From my perspective, it's just as easy as far as time and resources to buy them. I have a small example from eBay. They're fairly inexpensive to buy, and of course, there's a lot less room for error. So it's up to you, but just know that the level of detail you put in is what you get out. So the time it takes to create these, you could also be buying some. So it's up to you. So let's talk about nuts and bolts about how to actually do this stuff. So I've talked about the software, the types. I've talked about interactive and passive. Now we'll talk about how to create them. So for browser-based development environments, there's several options, and there's going to be a lot more as we move forward. There's Web VR, which is 2D. There's Chrome Experiments, and I encourage you to check out these links. But one I wanted to focus on and tell you about is InstaVR. Now, I'm still experimenting with InstaVR, and believe it or not, I found them on Facebook, so I guess their marketing department's doing quite a good job. But as you can see on screen, they promise to create a 360 environment, and you can publish to many, many platforms, including ones made for cardboard like iOS and Android, or even some of the higher ones like Gear VR and Oculus Rift, as well as just Web VR. So let me show you that. Of course, you can create for free, but they have premium accounts as well. Here's what you would get, and I already logged in and joined, and so this is an environment that you could create. You're looking at the actual editing environment. This is their demo room, and I'm just scrolling around, probably a little too fast for some of you, but just to show you what they provide. And this goes beyond just our passive one in a interactive one where you can create little triggers on screen. You can tell them what to do. Now, they're limited to things that trigger, say, a link to somewhere else or a music or voiceover, but the options of creating a link inside here would be quite extensive. So if you can think of something you could link to, say, a movie or other just-in-time learning, that would be pretty impressive to put in here as well. But other than packaging for cardboard, let's say we wanted to create this for a web and show it today, and maybe even put it in iSpring, we probably would not be able to do that simply because that, for me anyways, is the Pro version, and so we'd have to upgrade to the Pro account. Now again, because I'm experimenting and I'm doing things and I wanted to focus on doing things on the cheap, today I wanted to show you what you could do with InstaVR's free plan. So it's quite interesting, it's quite promising, but again, you can package it for, say, Android and iOS, which would allow you to see it on cardboard, but I just wanted to show you some of the items available. So with that, let's go back. And so that's one way you could create, and some of these other ones are pretty interesting. Chrome Experiments, I encourage you to check out, again, there's quite a learning curve with it. However, it's 3D, and it's quite interesting to see. So for a lot of these options, I would suggest that you start looking at the documentation available from Google. You can see here that they say you can use the SDK, the Software Development Kit, to produce VR for Android, for Unity, for Unreal, for Apple, and for just VR View, which is their website application view. So I'll be showing a quick step a little bit later about how to use that with Unity. So let's just take a quick look of how to do that. In order to use it with Unity, and I hope many of you are familiar with Unity, if not, I'll show you the environment here in a moment. There are some requirements, and these are listed in the documentation I just mentioned in the SDK. You'll need at least Unity 5.6, which is in beta, at least it was last week, and Google Cardboard SDK, which is available from the link there. Now again, download both, open them, and then once you get everything installed, which does take a while, open the Google package provided from the SDK, and there's a link on the page previous. And then, of course, it'll ask you, hey, this is for an older version. Go ahead and say, yes, that's fine, especially for experimentation. You could download it again if needed, but again, the update is required because you're using a beta version. So I'm going through this quickly because I just want to show you the high-level overview. Let's take a quick look. I have Unity open on my machine. This is what you would see with the VR demo. I'm double-clicking it, and this is going through the steps I just outlined. And you can see here I'm previewing the screen in editor mode. I mean, we're not actually live. But what is provided, and this is all built for you, it allows you to see what you can do within the Unity. Now, you're seeing it in a single view. Let's go to Game Preview. And what you'll notice is that there is split view. And that's why I want to show you the difference, because this is what you would see via cardboard. It may take a moment to load. And again, we're in the Unity environment creating for Android SDK. Notice we now have the split view. I can sort of simulate head movement by hitting the Alt key and swiping back and forth, up and down. You notice there's a distortion in the view, and this would be the important part about using the lenses that I mentioned earlier. But this is provided for you with the Google Cardboard SDK. I just wanted you to kind of see it in 3D real time. So. Okay, so here's an image screenshot of what I just showed you, just to give a clearer view. Again, this is using the free version of Unity as well as the Android SDK. So let's talk about 360 video, which is another quite popular way, and it may be for many of us the most attainable way. The most direct way to create 360 videos is, of course, for one, let me back up and say that you can always use, if you have Android, the Cardboard Camera app, but aside from that, and that allows you to have 360, you can capture 360 views, but you can also buy specialized cameras that do all that for you, starting from anywhere from 140 American on up to 350 or so, and upwards in near the thousands, depending on. These are some of the cheaper models I found, the LG 360 and the Ryko Theta S. Of course, remember that you'll also need to edit these possibly afterwards, but more importantly, and by the way, here's some editing programs that you can check out: Video Stitch, iMovie if you have Apple or Mac, and DaVinci Resolve, which is free, and we all know I like free. So those are softwares that you could check out in order to edit 360 video. Now, there's another way as well, and this is what I used in order to create my own 360 video. I used Blender, which is an open source 3D modeling software. Open source, it's free to use, and you can also use HDRI maps. Now, HDRI maps are created by Spherical, meaning they're projected on a sphere, and then you can use that sphere for lighting. Normally is what it's used for, but I can also use it as the image itself. So let me show you the video, and then I'll open up Blender so you can take a look at it. Now again, this Blender, as many of you may know, is a little bit intensive as far as learning curve, but I did want to show you what could be created with it. This is a little promo I did for another presentation I'm doing later, but what you're seeing is on screen, and I'm using my mouse to look around. The room that you're looking at is a HDRI map inside Blender, so it creates all the lighting, and then I have two movies going inside Blender, and I exported everything as a movie. And of course I'll tell you about that in a moment, but basically I just wanted you to see a quick example of what you could see. Now, for any of you that, and again this is on YouTube, so any of you that would be looking at this, say on a device or iPad, could move your device up and down on iPad, or if you're viewing on a device, it'll give you the little icon like we had with the Ash, it says View in VR. Now, of course, we don't see that here because I'm not on my device, but you could use this if you have the icon to view in cardboard cameras or in cardboard VR. So going back, so we created this in Blender, and Blender again is a 3D modeling program, but you can also use it for a video composition. And let me get, I'm moving stuff accidentally, but here's what basically you see, and again you'll see a lot of buttons and menus. This is quite extensive and there's quite a learning curve, but the good thing about Blender, aside being open source and free, is there's a huge community of Blender users, tutorials and what have you, but the basic gist of it is the camera that used to render this was created in a 360 view, so that it again edited everything in front of you. These two large rectangular slides house two movies that play during the presentation, and then everything is exported as a movie. That being said, in order to get your movies on to the 360 on YouTube, you specifically need what they call the spatial media metadata injector, and that's a lot of words, but basically it's a Python-based applet, or you can do it by command line, that adds metadata to your video. And so this allows YouTube to understand that your video is indeed a 360, and it allows it to be panned up and down, left, right. It adds that information needed to produce this magic itself. Now again, that seems rather simplistic given that I just showed you how it's created, but the main gist of it is that if you, no matter if you use the cameras seen here, or the specialized cameras like the GoPros or the LG or the Ryko, or you create it in Blender, you'll still need to add it for the metadata for YouTube. So let's take a quick look at how we might, once we develop these, add the 360 video inside iSpring. Using YouTube, once it's been uploaded, once it has the metadata, we go Share, Embed, and this looks just very similar to what we did for the Sketchfab 360. We go into our presentation, into iSpring, we add an object, we say we want to embed, we paste our code, wait for it to insert, and let's preview what we have here. Preview selected slide again, wrapping it in that HTML5 wrapper. We'll see it here. Again, I did not adjust the parameters of the video. Let me go down so I can play it. I'll mute it. Sorry about that. So I'm scanning left and right, and again, it's on small form, but I could have, all I have to do is adjust the embed code to take care of this. So it is indeed within our wrapper with our HTML5 presentation and inside iSpring. So let's talk about if you do create VR, and let's assume that you can do 360 videos with specialized video capturing devices or on Blender. But let's say you create a Unity environment or need some 3D models for your Blender environment, which you can also use. You can use things like TurboSquid, or for those of you that have the resource available from Adobe Creative Cloud, you can use Fuse Preview. Here's some links for those. Now, in any case, no matter what you use, whether it's background music for your videos, always pay attention to the license agreement, whether it's available for you to use or it's editorial or such. That's a topic for another day, but those of you that know what I'm talking about know that in order to show things as your creation, your development, you need to make sure that you have the rights to do so. However, these are some places you can go to get 3D models that are ready-made, and at the very least, they demonstrate the ability to use and import assets within your VR environment. So we talked about some ways to get VR in iSpring. One of the most obvious ways is adding web objects. You can also embed the content like I did for YouTube. But remember, like I suggested with the InstaVR 2D, you can add links. So let's say in your iSpring environment you wanted to create something, or you had a specialized Android app, you could link to that. You could link to the Google Play Store. You could link to the iTunes environment. So anything that you can link to can be added that way, of course. But remember that we also added 360 video and the ability to edit and view objects in real time. Now, you can always create Unity-based content for WebGL, and for those that know what I'm talking about, it's the ability to use sort of HTML5 technology to view games, simulations, or otherwise high-intense graphics in 3D. Right now, as far as my testing, it's hard for me to show you any Unity-made VR environments in HTML5, and I suspect that will change as Unity upgrades. But that being said, we could put regular Unity, quote-unquote, inside iSpring environment, but not the VR at this point. So let me just kind of, as I go along, everyone get your questions ready for discussion, but here's what we talked about today, and that's what VR is and isn't, the main differences between VR and AR. The reason it's important to learning, of course, is to engage our environment, our learners, but also create an environment that's immersive, and also show that we are actually, as educators and creators of the content, on the keeping track of what's going on with technology. We talked about the two major types from my perspective of VR, interactive and passive, and we also talked about different ways that you would present it, which would be the VR viewers, whether it's high-end ones that are integrated or the ones that use a smartphone. While we went through a lot of different examples, I did want to show you a few ways to design, develop from the back end to the front end VR, whether it's using open source items like Blender or the free version of Unity or the Google SDK. We also saw some web resources that you could use like InstaVR and some of the Chrome experiments. So, adding to that, finalizing, I wanted to show you those 3D resources if you needed. And most importantly, I wanted to show you that all of this is attainable and reachable and can be contained and presented within iSpring's environment. So with that, I tell you what, let's open it up for questions if we could.
Are you talking about the poll question?
Let's open up for discussion if we can. And I'm going to stop sharing screens. Can you take me off presenter mode?
I'm not sure how to do that. I can actually do this. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen, and I am going to stop sharing mine. So.
Okay. I just see there's a little typo. It should be customer care. If you guys have any questions iSpring related, you're more than welcome to submit them to that email address. Okay, so we're ready for the Q&A session, and let's start with the question from Eric. Can you use Adobe Premiere to edit or Final Cut X?
Yes, and this is specifically, I would say, for the 360 video. You can indeed use Premiere, from what I've read. Some of the other online discussions that I've read, let me go back to my slides, mention that the free version of DaVinci, was it called? Here, I'm going back, sorry. DaVinci Resolve, and I'm showing my screen here. So DaVinci Resolve is one that you can use to show and edit the screen as well. So certainly you can use Premiere. You may need additional plugins, but I think as natively it works.
Thank you. And the next question is from Kevin. Does iSpring allow any interactions to be created inside a 360 video, if you know by any chance?
Yeah, so you know what you could do. I'd say the short answer is no, because remember, a 360 video is quite separate from all those things that we talked about. So you could certainly create various interactions. Now, inside the 360 environment, you could, depending on how you created it, if it's just a 360 video, you probably could show animations created from iSpring or such, but remember the 360 video is just one of those sort of passive things. It's just a video that you can pan and view the entire area. Now, if there were other things, say like the VR, created by InstaVR, or if it were, something that was created in Unity, certainly you could create additional interactions or iSpring created content and put that inside that environment. But just remember, there's a little bit of difference with the 360 video. It's quite self-contained and a little passive. So.
Thank you. And so would you recommend Unity for beginning versus creators?
That's a good question.
VR.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just misread it. VR creators.
Yeah, and it's good to get an idea of what's available. So Unity has been the de facto standard for a lot of game development, for e-learning, when it comes to high-end simulation and games. So it's good to download it and get an idea of what it can do, whether you're a designer or developer, at least that you can see, oh, I've seen the environment, I know what's going on. So let's compare that to, say, another environment that's a little different, because Blender is, of course, you can create 3D models. You can also do limited game functionality, as well as a whole bunch of different things. Like I showed, you can do some compositing for video. But that being said, remember I said Blender has a real extensive high learning curve, or sharp learning curve. So Unity has a slightly sharp learning curve as well, but just like Blender, there's a huge online community. There's a lot of available resources that you can purchase inside Unity, meaning create packages that are complete, and some of these are free and some of these are paid for. So the short answer to your question is, I would, if you're interested in getting started and getting your toes wet to develop VR, download Unity, see what's going on just from the Unity perspective. Go out and get the Cardboard SDK, download that, open it up as I did, as I showed you all, and see what's going on. And then begin to say, okay, I know how to do this, but how do I customize this? How do I code that? In any of these cases, you're going to find that perhaps something's outside of your area of expertise or comfort level, whether it's from a coding perspective or design perspective or just a technology perspective, but you won't know that until you get into it. So I suggest getting into Unity, seeing, oh, I'm going to need help from a coder, or no, I don't. I see this available online. Someone else has had this same question, and here's the answer for it in the forums. So.
Thanks a lot. And moving on to the next question from Gary. Actually, a couple of questions. So the first one is, what are the hardware specs for developing virtual reality? And the second is, what is the ballpark investment needed for software purchases when using open source and purchasing options?
So going back to the first part, so hardware recommendations. I have just a general purchased laptop. It's not a gaming laptop per se. It's meaning it's not a high-end video heavy, excuse me, laptop. I could produce it. And those specifications required. If you go to Unity's website and begin the download, it'll show you what's involved. Now, for Google SDK, obviously you will need a smartphone, be it Android or iOS. And of course, to view it, you'll need a viewer of some sort. And again, I provided the links for that. So the minimum requirements on the viewer side is different than the development side. Ballpark figure, honestly, you could do things aside from buying a laptop if you don't already have one, or desktop, or whatever your computing device is. Aside from that purchase, you could do it near free. And that's why I wanted to show everyone how to do it without breaking the bank. So whether you use Unity to do immersive 3D and add some controls, meaning like external controls to move forward or back rather than just doing the spherical view, that can be done and published by Unity for free using the SDK from Google Cardboard. As well as, remember, the InstaVR can do a lot of those things from a 2D perspective, but in order to publish for, say, web, you would need to get their pro account, which I don't know how much it is. So ballpark is anywhere from free to however much you want to buy and purchase extra. Remember that I said for Unity, if you wanted to purchase additional niceties, there's a huge community of people selling their stuff on Unity. So you could purchase pre-made packages, specialized GUI environments. So there's anything that you can imagine is available for purchase and sometimes free. You just have to look at the asset store in Unity. So.
Thank you very much. You actually covered the next question from Gary as well. All right, and moving on to the question from Justin. It's my understanding of virtual reality that while it's gaining popularity rapidly, it still has a long way to go to become the next smartphone-type device. What I mean by this is that it will still be a while for virtual reality to be popular among the masses. Can you speak on that topic?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's going to take a little time. So let's go back real quickly to what I said about AR. And the reason I brought up AR is because we've known about AR from a technology perspective, from an e-learning perspective, for many, many years. I remember writing a blog post about it, indicating to some clients, I'm like, look, we can really create this, and I think it was for some sort of aircraft company or something, like, let your viewers and your learners see the aircraft in front of them. All we have to do is, do AR, and this was before smartphones were prevalent. So there has been an indication that we are very interested in the e-learning community and creating immersive environments. But I agree with you. Some of what I showed is sort of eye candy. It's just nice to have. It's not necessary in order to create and facilitate these learning environments. So as you go forward and as you talk to your clients or stakeholders, it's important that you know what's important to your learners, and whether or not this would add value. Now, one reason in the initial part of the talk I said, look, why VR? Is, I do feel like that there's the potential, as you suggest, the potential to have a lot of innovation. And that's what we want to do, is make sure that we are demonstrating to our learners, to our stakeholders, to our clients, to whomever, that we understand that this is a trend, and that we can demonstrate to them that we are continuing to be a part of that and have knowledge of it. So I agree with you. This is really kind of cool, and it may be outside of our core learning group and core content. But guess what? If we show someone, hey, did you know that this same environment that I showed you, this facility that we keep talking about, you can see the actual facility that we're talking about. You can, for air traffic or for air safety inspectors, you can go into a cockpit of an aircraft if you want. So really, we're just pushing forward those things we have already been creating, but saying, look, here it is in a simulated environment, and now you can experience it as if you're almost there. But to go back to the question, I agree. But the smartphones are very highly technical now, and I think we're very close for the technology to be there for everyone. And more importantly, as I've shown here, it's available from a budget from a financial perspective as well. But that's a good question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for answering. And the next question is from Gabriel. Is there a way to create 360 video without a 360 camera via panorama mode on a phone, for example?
Right, and remember I said you can do sort of the cheap and easy version of a 360 video with your camera, with your smartphone, depending on whether you use cardboard camera for Android or whether you use something made. There's sort of specialized apps that are made for iOS that allow you to stitch them together in the app. So the short answer is yes. You don't have to have a specialized camera, but what the specialized cameras do is allow you to capture all of that in one. Now, remember, in my 360 video for YouTube, I sort of used a cheat. I used panoramic created HDRI maps, which are created on a sphere in general. And again, those were open source that I used, made sure that the license agreement made that I could use them in anything I wanted. But more importantly, it was a self-contained created environment that I could put animated images inside a compositing video editor called Blender in this case, which is also a 3D editor. So the shorter answer is you can use the cameras and it does all the capture for you. You may need to edit it in Premiere or DaVinci or whatever it is. But afterwards, in order to either get it on YouTube, you need to add that extra metadata, or for Facebook, it's just a 360 camera capture. But so yes, you don't have to have the expensive cameras. You can do it all for free and open source, but you have to be a little creative. And with Blender, remember, there's a little bit of learning curve.
Thank you very much. You actually, with this answer, you covered the next question that we had, so thank you very much. And moving on to the next question from Gary. Is it harder to create interactive virtual reality content for web rather than Google Cardboard in terms of controls, etc.? What are the main considerations when choosing which platform to develop for?
I think that's a great question. So, and it's all about personal. So, it's all about personal preference, personal taste from a development standpoint. I would say that depending on what level of interactivity and what level of content you're providing, it may be a little easier to develop in a desktop environment, HTML environment, given that you have less constrained resources. So by that I mean, remember I said, you know, a 360 YouTube video is self-contained, and it can be viewed on iPad just by panning and scanning, or if you have a camera, you know, if you view it on iOS or a web smartphone, you have the, you know, here's the Google Cardboard. So just to encapsulate, generally speaking, my preference would be HTML5 and then see, can I also recreate this environment in a smaller form on, you know, VR? Is this something that would even work in VR? So I think both from a development and design development and then the end user perspective as far as learning, does it add value, and will my learners be immersed, or will they find more engagement in it? And sometimes the answer is no, in which case, you know, we can do it in a desktop or HTML5 environment. So, but I would love to continue that conversation further. So whomever asked that question, thank you for asking, and let's talk more.
Yeah, okay. So next question is from Antonella. Once you have the 3D model in iSpring, can you interact with it other than turning it around, for example, dragging an item from A to B?
So I wonder if this particular question has to do with maybe motion or other. So with the Sketchfab that I showed you, the short answer would be no. However, remember that I said you could also create stuff in Unity, publish it for WebGL, in which case then you could embed it inside iSpring. So, and again, we're talking about levels of complexity and learning curves. So the short answer is yes. You can have a fully interactive 3D model that does other things besides just viewing and rotating. Maybe that if you say click here or do something that it has a motion, or, you know, there's any sort of number of combinations you could have. But as long as you can encapsulate it in a WebGL or HTML5 environment, you can certainly encapsulate it, embed it, and display it and present it within an iSpring environment.
Thank you. Okay, and the next question is from Nick. Can you load a 2D iSpring course inside of a virtual reality environment? And what software suites would be used?
Well, I think so it would depend, obviously. So you can create anything, and this kind of goes back to a question earlier. So you can
Mhm.
create anything as far as a regular, what we would say, regular HTML environment or mobile environment interaction. But within that 3D world, remember in the Blender example, I showed that the videos are running in the 3D video. Now that's a video.
Mhm.
But take that same concept and put it in Unity. So let's say we had a virtual bulletin board wherein it had a simple quiz that you could click. That could certainly be something that could be integrated within a 3D or a virtual reality environment. Again, in this case, created in Unity. You probably could create it in Unreal Engine. But certainly the short answer is yes, but what we get then is a interaction created in iSpring, exported, imported into a Unity environment, and then exported out to a virtual environment. So it really depends on how you package, how you import, and what your final deliverable is.
Mhm.
Short answer is yes. Longer answer, it's a little complex.
I'm interested what would be the case of using it. Maybe like creating a virtual classroom or something like that.
Well, and for those that are old, like me, you may remember Second Life and maybe 10, 11 years ago, how everybody in the e-learning community was very excited about Second Life, how we could create, online and virtual universities and classrooms. And that, from my perspective, and maybe it didn't, it fell through because, it's more fun to fly to different environments and change your clothes and have a literally fly in Second Life. So with that in mind, maybe that's not our goal in virtual reality. Maybe our goal is not to create a virtual classroom.
Mhm.
Maybe as we engage and show our users a simulated environment, we say, oh, by the way, here is another piece of content, no matter what it is, whether it's a quiz or an animation or anything created outside of that virtual environment. Would this add value? Or, here, try this. So you can bring anything you want, whether it's video or audio, just like in a regular environment, just like a regular in HTML5 environment or desktop or mobile environment, but does it add value? And that's what we need to begin asking is certainly, and that's a choice for everybody, stakeholders and clients and developers and designers on their own. My important point is that we can certainly do it, and we
Mhm.
can do it on the cheap to demonstrate value or use a case study to see if it's worthwhile.
Mhm. Thank you. And we got a little note from Nick. The use case for my question actually promotes focus on the content in a world with distractions.
Oh, very good. That sounds very um, like very karmic.
Mhm. Right. Okay, and the next question is from Thomas. Is iSpring offering a possibility to integrate VR movies directly without uploading, for example, to YouTube before?
I don't know that I can answer that directly as far as what iSpring plans in the future. So what I was showing is, of course, using 360 YouTube, which the YouTube 360 allows for that interaction. So it handles a lot of the processing of looking up, down, left, right, and it can also the handling of the actual split view that's needed for VR.
Mhm.
So that's more of a development case in my perspective. But certainly, as I mentioned, anything that can be created and housed in HTML5 can be seen in iSpring. I don't know that there, no matter the authoring tool or the environment or how you create things, there's always a different way to do it. So
Mhm.
it's not necessarily whether there are plans to do VR. It's what we can do with what we have now. So.
Mhm. Okay, thank you very much for your answer. And it looks like at this point we've covered all the questions that we had for a Q&A session, and I would like to ask you guys, our attendees, if you liked this session and whether you found it useful and whether or not you will be able to implement what you've learned during that session, and whether or not you would like to have more of such sessions, not necessarily um, iSpring related, but more on the e-learning in general, in the future, and we will definitely listen to you and try to find more speakers like Michael, but I don't think that are too many like you, Michael, because I think that you've presented in a very, very good way and it was really interesting and very educative. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for covering that topic for our audience. And yeah, I also would like to say that next week we are going to be at the Learning Solutions Conference, and Michael and I will be present there. And if you guys are planning to go there, don't hesitate to stop by our booth, number 407. We would love to talk to you and discuss any types of questions that you have or just talk in general. This will be very exciting. And okay, I think that at this point we're ready to wrap up. Michael, would you like to say anything?
No, I appreciate you, iSpring, for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to talk about VR. It's very exciting. There's a lot to talk about, as indicated by my slides. There's a lot of information, and I appreciate all the questions that came in. So let's continue the dialogue. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks. Have a great day, everyone, and see you sometime soon. Bye-bye.